In 2016, you said that. I'm going to surround myself with only the best and most serious people.
But what I would say is this. Note the one most prominent Republican who is not supporting Donald Trump this election, Vice President Mike Pence.
I cannot in good conscience endorse Donald Trump.
His Secretary of State called him a moron. Mattis says he doesn't even respect the Constitution. John Kelly says he's the worst person he ever met. Think about that applying to any other president of the United States at any other time. Their chief of staff, their defense secretary, their secretary of state, their national security advisor are the ones who have the most damning judgments of his competence and character. That is chilling.
Geez, George is on quite the mission, huh?
About this election is how far from normal it is.
But he's right, and here's why. Take any CEO of a crumbling business, and if you want to gauge the true nature of it, you don't go and ask said CEO what he thinks, because of course he's going to deflect so that he doesn't face any blame. You get to the root of what is going on by asking those who work for them what they thought, and Trump is no different. So before this country sleepwalks into giving him another pulp at fascism, maybe let's listen to what those closest to him thought about his first stint and whether or not they endorse a second term.
In 2016, you said that. I'm going to surround myself with only the best and most serious people.
Well, I did do that.
This
and we had tremendous, look, we had the best economy we've ever had. The world has ever seen.
Your Vice President, Mike Pence, is running against you.
Yeah.
Your Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, she's running against you. Your former Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, said he's not supporting you. You mentioned National Security Advisor John Bolton. He's not supporting you either. You mentioned Attorney General Bill Barr, says you shouldn't be president again, calls you the consummate narcissist and troubled man. You recently called Barr a gutless pig. Your second defense secretary is not supporting you, called you irresponsible. This week, you and your White House called your White House Chief of Staff, John Kelly, weak and ineffective and born with a very small brain. You called your acting White House Chief of Staff, Mick Mulvaney, a born loser. You called your first Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, dumb as a rock, and your first Defense Secretary, James Mattis, the world's most overrated general. You called your White House Press Secretary, Kayleigh Kennedy, milquetoast, and multiple times you've referred to your Transportation Secretary, Elaine Chao, as Mitch McConnell's China-loving wife. So, why did you hire all of them in the first place?
Well, too many in the media seem to be reporting on Trump with kid gloves. I mean, is it complacency? I don't know. It seems that ABC's anchor George Stephanopoulos is shouldering the task of how to cover him accurately by himself, outside of the Midas Mighty, of course. From a scathing opening segment last week outlining how abnormal everything to do with Trump's trial is.
Until now, no American president had ever faced a criminal trial. No American president had ever faced a federal indictment for retaining and concealing classified documents. No American president had ever faced a federal indictment or a state indictment for trying to overturn an election or been named an unindicted co-conspirator in 2 other states for the same crime. No American president ever faced hundreds of millions of dollars in judgments for business fraud, defamation, and sexual abuse. Until now, no American presidential race had been more defined by what's happening in courtrooms than what's happening on the campaign trail. Until now. The scale of the abnormality is so staggering that it can actually become numbing. It's all too easy to fall into reflexive habits, to treat this as a normal campaign, where both sides embrace the rule of law, where both sides are dedicated to a debate based on facts and the peaceful transfer of power. But that is not what's happening this election year. Those bedrock tenets of our democracy are being tested in a way we haven't seen since the Civil War. It's a test for the candidates, for those of us in the media, and for all of us as citizens.
This, where he appeared alongside Nicole Wallace on MSNBC and offered a much needed reminder as to how those closest to Trump think and if they endorse him for a second term.
Little glimpses of it.
Right.
His Secretary of State called him a moron. Mattis says he doesn't even respect the Constitution. John Kelly says he's the worst person he ever met. Think about that applying to any other president of the United States at any other time. Their chief of staff, their defense secretary, their secretary of state, their national security advisor are the ones who have the most damning judgments of his competence and character. That is chilling.
Vice President Mike Pence, his own vice president, who was much closer to Trump, was just steps from the Oval Office, much closer than the UN ambassador was, because he cannot in good conscience say he's backing someone who tried to overturn our election and is just fundamentally a threat to democracy. These other people know that, but Mike Pence knows the stakes are too high.
Now here's the thing, while many of those very Republicans lambasting Trump with their full chest are the first ones back in line when it is no longer lucrative or there's no more books to sell, see Bill Barr and more recently Nikki Haley, despite her many statements to the contrary.
Quickly, someone who served as ambassador to the United Nations, still pulling in pretty large numbers, a vote 2 months after quitting the race. Someone who ran against Donald Trump as too old and unfit to serve today said he has her vote. Nikki Haley.
And it was the words of Nikki Haley that were very explicit about Donald Trump. Said in part that they were disgusting, awful, unhinged, and said that somebody that makes comments like that doesn't deserve to be commander-in-chief. Her own husband got on social media and fired back and said the difference between humans and animals would never allow the dumbest ones to lead the pack.
We need shrinks and cult experts to explain this, because with what you're reporting, it doesn't make a lick of sense to me. And it's so recent. I mean, J.D. Vance in 2015 said something similar, but for her and her husband to both been feuding publicly with him just days and weeks before endorsing him is inexplicable to me at a human level.
It is nonetheless apparent that the Republican Party are more divided now than ever before, and only come together when they have no other option or they're scared and want a seat at the table. But make no mistake, if there is one man who will never forget the words of admonishment, it's Donald Trump, which means all the more reason we should fear what will happen in a second term, because he'll solely surround himself with the most extreme yes people imaginable. I mean, look at those already salivating in the wings at the thought of his Project 2025 plan. The Stephen Millers of the world, standing back and standing by, which, as Jasmine Crockett highlighted on the floor recently, is primed and ready to be implemented free from any adults that were previously in the room with him.
Let's see, you're the executive director for the America First Legal, correct?
That's correct.
All right. And America First Legal is a member of Project 2025, which is dedicated to creating the playbook for the next conservative administration and what it calls the Project Pillars, correct?
We are proud contributors to Project 2025.
And are you familiar with Project 2025's mandate for leadership?
In fact, I am.
Okay. And in fact, you wrote some of the sections of this mandate related to the DOJ, correct?
Sure did.
And the mandate outlines policy priorities for the next conservative president. Is that correct?
It does.
It calls for eliminating the Department of Education, eliminating the Department of Commerce, deploying the military for the use of domestic law enforcement against protesters under the Insurrection Act of 1807. It also has the repealing of Schedule F status for thousands of federal employees to allow a president to replace career civil servants with unqualified partisan loyalists. That's probably my favorite of it. It also prohibits the FBI from combating the spread of misinformation and disinformation, like Russia and China, who are actively trying to interfere with American elections. I don't know why or how anybody can support Project 2025. And I know that there was allegedly a joke about dictators and whether or not that's funny, but in the United States of America, dictatorships are never funny. And Project 2025 is giving the playbook for authoritarianism as well as the next dictator to come in. And I know that you are doing your jobs here by making sure that hopefully some juror turns on and finds some viral moment of you spewing more of the nonsense as it relates to the president.
And even with those alleged adults, look at what he was able to accomplish first time around. Family separation, Muslim ban, tax cuts for the 1%, and of course, stacking the court with extreme conservative justices, to which we are now living with the repercussions.
The battle over reproductive rights, a key issue in the 2024 race, is escalating. In a first-of-its-kind move, lawmakers in Louisiana have now passed a bill to reclassify two commonly used drugs in abortions as controlled dangerous substances. NBC's senior Washington correspondent Hallie Jackson is following this one for us. Hallie, good morning.
Hey there, Craig. Good morning to you. This is a controversial plan that hundreds of Louisiana doctors say they oppose. If the governor does ultimately sign this bill into law, and he's expected to, Louisiana would be the first state in the country to criminalize these abortion drugs in this way. But critics fear it may not be the last. A new front line this morning in the battle over abortion access.
And the bill is finally passed.
Louisiana lawmakers moving forward with a plan to put 2 abortion drugs in the same category as so-called controlled dangerous substances like depressants and stimulants, criminalizing the possession of mifepristone and misoprostol used to induce abortions for anyone without a prescription.
And if this is what those around him were saying as a means to cow his most extreme plan, can you even imagine what is to come with nothing but people around him stroking his ego? I mean, come on, guys. Listen to George.
I think the most important thing that people should understand about this election is how far from normal it is. We have never had a former presidential candidate who was impeached and then indicted for trying to overturn an election. Never.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Meidas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.